Hello and welcome to Line and Mouse Commentary. I'm Holland and this is my best friend Tori. If you're new to our show, we rank various forms of entertainment by different categories out of a total score of 10, with only 2 points allowed for our personal taste. Don't worry, we break down everything as we go. Just feel free to agree, disagree, or just learn about something new. Just be sure to tread lightly. There will be hot takes and spoilers. Many hot takes in this episode. So, cut to the intro, Tori. Sorry, okay. I still have to read the script. I do not have it memorized. So there's your behind the curtain there.
I mean, we've done like 50 episodes at this point, and I feel like I'm still like, welcome to what's our name?
I know.
Like I can't get through it without reading it, which is bad.
Have we really done like 50 episodes?
I think so. Close to.
Yeah?
Yeah. I'd have to go back and count.
Well, if we've done 2 years... Yeah, it would be about 50.
We did like 25 and then 18. And then this is the 4th episode of season 3, so...
Yeah. So we're...
Close to 50.
Yeah. So. Sorry, my dog is in the room with us, so if you hear any like little scrabbling...
She's an itchy girl, and she does scratch.
Got allergies, so it's your fun fact for the day. Anyways, today, if you have not read the title of this video, or if you're just listening, I chose for us to review the Netflix series Avatar: The Last Airbender, episode 2.
Because we have covered episode 1.
We did. We covered episode 1 in our last season. So if you haven't had any experience with the show, go back and listen to our first episode if you want to hear our takes on that. But if you want to just hear us on episode 2, you're in for a treat, guys. You're in for such a treat. So I have some spoiler-free background information for you guys just to get us started. So Avatar: The Last Year, and this is condensed compared to our last episode. It's a little more of a robust introduction, so feel free to take a listen to that. Avatar: The Last Airbender is an American fantasy drama television series developed by Albert Kim for Netflix. It is a live-action adaptation of the animated television series of the same name, created by Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko for Nickelodeon. The series was first announced in September 2018, with DiMartino and Konietzko attached as both executive producers and showrunners. However, in June 2020, the pair departed the series over creative differences. In August 2021, Kim was officially announced as the writer, executive producer, and showrunner. In the first season, each episode reportedly cost more than $15 million to make. The first season was released on Netflix on February 22nd, 2024, with 8 episodes in total, running between 47 and 63 minutes in length. In March 2024, the series was renewed for a second and third season. Avatar: The Last Airbender topped the weekly global Netflix chart from February 19th to 25th, with 154 million hours watched by 21 million viewers in its first week. During its second week, viewership decreased to only a meager 144 million hours watched by 19.9 million viewers, and ranked among the top 10 in 92 countries and at number 1 in 76 countries. So in the first 2 weeks of its release, pretty popular show there. A couple accolades. It is two accolades so far. The show was nominated at the 2024 Kids' Choice Awards for Favorite Family TV Show, and Gordon Cormier was nominated for Favorite Male TV Star for a Family Show. Here's the Netflix synopsis of the series. A young boy known as the Avatar must master the 4 elemental powers to save a world at war and fight a ruthless enemy bent on stopping him. So that's just an overview. I don't have a synopsis for this specific episode because I didn't trust that they wouldn't be a spoiler for somebody. But the second episode we're reviewing today is called Warriors. It was directed by Michael Goy and was written by Joshua Hale Fialkov. I can't pronounce his last name. It sounds like Eastern European, but there you go. So if you don't want any spoilers for episode 2, go ahead and click off now, go watch it, then come back and finish this episode. So, but Tori's going to kick us off into our first category.
Okay. This episode, I'll just start. So for plot, story, and cohesion, which can include resolution through a season when we're talking about TV shows, we're talking about just episode 2 right now. Out of its possible 2 points, I gave this no points. I have a tendency to be more lenient, I think, in general than Holland. Not about everything, but I think overall I tend to be a little bit nicer about things than you are, and that's okay. That's why we do this show, is for different perspectives. But I could not give it any points.
I'm very surprised.
I was thinking about it and I was like, was there any story moment in this that I thought was like actually good? And I don't really know if there is. I think all of the things about it that are good are just like the basis of the adaptation. And if we're talking about this specific adaptation and how this episode is presented, it's just presented very poorly. So I'll talk about those things. I really don't have a lot of notes this episode, to be 100% honest. So it may go by pretty quick for me, but I will address some of the things that I found problems. First of all, Zuko does not feel like a threat at all in this episode. I understand that with the introduction of the character of General Zhao, which I'll talk a little bit about in characters.
He's just the commander in this episode.
Commander
Zhao.
Commander Zhao. With the introduction of him, like, we do kind of see that perhaps Zuko as a character is just like a piece of something larger. Like, you do get sort of that contextual information, I guess, about Zuko as a character, but still at the core of it, Zuko is the first villain that is given to you in the story of Aang and his friends, and he feels like a angsty, pouty teenage boy, and that's it. There's no actual risk that I feel like he presents. There's no big evidence that he's like an incredible firebender or he's just like incredibly ruthless, because we see all these scenes in this episode of him just kind of like whining to Iroh about things. And I understand that those scenes exist even in the original, but they're never outbalanced in regards to Zuko as the stoic, almost borderline cruel teenage boy who is fueled by his own thirst to reclaim his honor. All of those nuances of Zuko are just really missing. And I know those sound like character notes, but it makes the stakes feel so low when you're talking about your conflicts, because I don't care that he's after the Avatar. It's obvious that he's just a whiny brat. And so I think that's like the first really big, like, thumbs down thing about this episode, is just the posability of Zuko as a threat is just not there. They pose him as the threat, but the threat is not believable in any way. Another thing that kind of kills the stakes is when the trio arrives to the Kyoshi Island and Sokka walks into like the sort of like door of the big statue or tower there, the shrine. Yeah. And then all the Kyoshi warriors jump them. And the first thing I noticed is how they're holding them like this.
Yeah.
And it's like, are you kidding me? I could turn around and break out of your hold on me. Like,
it's like have you seen the meme of like Edward when he's sitting down in the first Twilight and he's like
yeah, I have seen that.
That's how they're holding him.
They literally, they're just like, all three of them. And so it's like, wait a second, you're posing this now as a story point that they've arrived to this island and these crazy, never before seen to the viewer warrior women are out here with their wild face paint, and now they are the threat, the current threat, and they're holding them like this? Like, what are you? Who are you? Get off me. Why are you touching me? And so immediately the stakes, where as an audience member you should be going, oh crud, who are these people, Are they a threat? You know, now all of a sudden you're laughing at them.
Right.
Because it feels so disgenuinely like a conflict
Mm-hmm.
or like any sort of confrontation because, and I, you know, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be like, you know, I think some people would argue and say like, well, you have to protect your actors. Nobody is going to get hurt by being fully gripped on the upper arm.
I don't think that's, I feel like protecting the actors was not even on their minds. It was
Probably
just
not.
bad. It was
just
just
bad acting.
Yeah.
And I know that, again, that could be a character note, but it's presented as this is now the threat of the week, you know, the threat of the episode are these Kyoshi warriors. We have no idea who they are, what their intentions are. They have no idea that who the Avatar and his friends are or their intentions. So there should be some sort of tension here, and the tension is immediately lost because they're holding them like they're about to play a game of Red Rover. And that's it.
I've seen kids more intense in Red Rover.
Oh, that's true. I almost got my wrist broken as a
I know.
kid playing
I feel like
Red
so
Rover.
many broken arms and,
Yeah.
and you know, shoulders disjointed happened in Red Rover.
So
Well,
it's just poor. It's just poor storytelling because I know it seems like small stuff to nitpick, but those small details broke the immersion so fast for me. And now I'm just not locked in. I'm not focused at all about what's going on because why is this Kyoshi warrior holding Katara like this?
Well, and it removes any of the plot points that are to follow, meaning, for example, them saying that this was a shrine they're trying to protect. They're trying to protect outsiders from coming to their island. They're, you know, they don't believe that Aang is the Avatar. Like, all of those plot points, now we don't buy it because it wasn't
Exactly.
convincing in their introduction.
Even the plot point of like the Kyoshi warriors are generational and trained very specifically to be protectors and warriors.
Right.
Well, like, what are you protecting?
Yeah.
Because nothing about this first, you know, I guess confrontation, even though it doesn't feel like a confrontation, but what should be the first confrontation, everything about it feels fake.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't, like you said, you just don't buy anything that comes after, unfortunately. I thought it was really, really, really early for Aang to throw out the "they were scared of me" card. When he does this talking about, it's like a flashback where he's talking about where he started training with Gyatso, and some of the other monks were scared of my like power. And I'm thinking to myself, this is episode 2, bro, and you are like 12 years old. That is really early to pull out the "they were scared of me" card. I could see that coming, you know, later on down the road when perhaps we see more of like Aang's struggle of learning the elements, and, you know, perhaps he's asked like, why do you seem to like you are holding back, or that you avoid trainings, or that something, you know, you could throw it out at that point, but it seemed so early to bring that up that, again, it does not feel believable. You have given us no indication that you could wreck anybody. So the fact that everybody, for Aang to be like, yeah, they were scared of, not, and he didn't say it like pompously or anything, but just like for Aang to be like, they were scared of me. Why? You are a twerp. Like, respectfully, you are a twerp. What are you talking about? So it's just like the context of so many of these plot points and like story elements that they decide to deliver, I think are delivered in ways or at times that make it the least believable possible.
Yeah.
And so again, I'm just like, what are we talking about? None of that makes any sense right now. Another, really my last note, because again, I don't have a ton. So spoilers for anybody who has not watched the whole animated show. But I'm going to talk about something here.
Say what season it happens in so people can kind of know. I believe
it's mid to late season 2 or book 2 of the animated series. Something happens, and I'm about to talk about it now. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's kind of when it happens, is in that range, mid to late season 2 of the animated. So there is a point And I honestly don't remember the full context about it. It's been a hot minute since I've watched seasons 2 and 3. But I know that this is a thing that happens where in the Avatar state, Kyoshi takes over the body of Aang.
That was in, it's the episode, I think it is season 2. It's Avatar Day.
Right. Okay.
So if you have not seen that episode, click ahead. Just scrub ahead on this episode.
That doesn't happen in book 1 at all. And here we are, episode 2, and Aang goes into the Avatar state. He and Kyoshi have a conversation, which whatever, okay, they have the conversation. What I did not expect was for them to go ahead and throw in, let's just have Kyoshi take over for a little bit.
Yeah.
And, smack some dudes around, and then we'll go back to Aang. And when I tell you, it was the most jarring, confusing. If you walk into this show never having seen the animated show, at this point I would be like, what in the world am I watching?
Yeah. Because
you don't have enough context and knowledge about the Avatar and who the Avatar is as a person and what the, I guess, lineage of the Avatar means in regards to like the Avatar state and the idea that like every past Avatar kind of lives inside the current Avatar. Like that's a lot of really nuanced lore that cannot be fully explained this early in the show. And they have a conversation with Aang and Katara about it. And so I don't know if that's what they were trying to rely on or whatever to like give you the context, but it's not enough. And it's too soon to have something that, in my opinion, kind of catastrophic happen on Kyoshi Island. It's not like, Aang was facing like this crazy boss battle, this unovercomable thing, and now Kyoshi must step in, or that he goes to call upon previous avatars for assistance. It's just kind of like she's like, you know what? Let me show you what I can do kind of thing, and then just like kicks some butts and then goes away. And I just thought it was so unnecessary and messy, just absolutely
it was really messy. Yeah.
And again, so confusing for a viewer that does not have that prior knowledge. And we've talked about this with adaptations before, but I feel like with really any adaptation, you have to go in knowing that you have to balance your two audiences, and those audiences being people that know this like it's inside out, back of your hand, and people who have never watched a day of the original in their life. And you have to be able to cater to both. And if you are only catering to people who have a working knowledge of what's going on, then you lose so much from that audience. And I feel like in that moment in particular, if you have no working knowledge of Avatar, at that point I'd be like, I don't even know what I'm watching anymore.
Right.
Like, what is going on?
Right. And they try and like retcon it by saying, oh no, Aang can only do that when he's at one of the shrines, like one of the Avatar's shrines. Mm-hmm. But it's like, the concept of that, I feel like, is not a valuable concept, because if the Avatar has been around forever, like any location they go to could have a shrine to an Avatar. Like, we don't have that, and it's like, another thing that I didn't like about that was Aang, this is kind of a point I have in the plot as well. Aang and Kyoshi spend so much time talking about the same thing for a good 20 minutes.
It's an insanely circular
conversation. And so it's like, okay, if Kyoshi is all about like being a warrior, and she could have just like taken over Aang's body and like fought off these bad guys in the first place, then why'd she waste all that time talking?
That's what I'm saying. And so it's like, and if it's that easy, if it just happens like that, then what is truly
and Aang didn't have any like, like he didn't have any control over it or anything. He's just like, just talking to one of his past lives, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, my turn now. Like,
right. And,
what?
And I think what that suggests is that, like, if it's that easy, then what is the purpose of Aang even having to learn and mastering all the elements himself when he could just go into the Avatar state and be like, hey, Avatar Roku, some firebending right now would be really cool. And then Roku's like, okay, buddy, dink. And then he's like, Roku's here. And he just, you know, it's like, it just, it diminishes the role of Aang as the new Avatar.
It undermines him as incompetent.
Right.
Like, he's not able to do it. His past lives are going to bail him out here instead of Aang having the opportunity to learn and grow as a character.
And I'm not necessarily against the idea of Aang being able to connect to his past lives and have conversations with them and perhaps learn perspectives from them. But at the end of that, like, he needs to go and do the work himself. He cannot rely on Avatar Kyoshi to kick butt for him. He has to learn how to do that himself.
And I think a big problem with that, and this is kind of taken into my notes too, I think a big problem with that is that kind of conversation, and this is not really a spoiler, but that conversation point that Aang has with Kyoshi is at almost the end of the animated show.
Right.
Which is when you've watched Aang grow, and now he has this kind of turning point of a decision to make, which I'm not going to talk into if you haven't seen it, don't worry. He has this kind of, the big question mark of his mission is there, and Kyoshi gives him very similar advice to the advice she gives him in this scene.
It's just far too early here.
Too early. We haven't watched Aang grow at all. Now we're doing, and this kind of goes into my character points, all we've done is we've taken Aang in the first episode as this like weak, kind of weepy, uncertain, unhappy, you know, Avatar that doesn't want to be the Avatar because he's scared, and now we've just doubled down on it.
Right.
We haven't pulled away and shown you.
There has been no change from that. And it's like, and it makes, it almost makes looking back, I mean, I know we already watched and reviewed episode 1, but it makes me go back to episode 1 and be like, now that setup was even worse.
Right.
Because like you said, they doubled down. So it's like, now I look back on that and I'm like, so that was absolutely pointless, because it could have been redeemed in this episode a little bit if now we do have this weepy, sort of hesitant, not sure what to do, kind of sad Avatar, and then here he maybe meets Kyoshi Avatar state. She gives him advice and he's like, you know what? Yeah. And he goes back in and he does what needs to be done. And so but that shift doesn't happen.
No.
She's like, sit down, kid. I'll handle this.
Because you're a weak, wimpy Avatar that can't do anything and doesn't want to do anything.
Right. And so these are the reasons that's all the notes I have, but like, that's the reason where it's like, I'm watching this episode and I'm like, everything that is good about the build of the first few episodes in the animated show are just completely destroyed in this episode. And so I could not give it any points. So 0 out of 2 for me.
Man. All right. So for me, for plot and story delivery, plot, story, and cohesion, I also give this 0 points. So kind of summarizing a lot of what you said, my like big note takeaway for this category is, did we really make any progress in this episode?
Nope.
No, we did not. My mouth just bumped my microphone. I'm sorry, headphone listeners. But no, we didn't. We didn't make any progress of the plot whatsoever. We were introduced to some new characters. You could argue a little bit that bringing in Commander Zhao into this plot kind of gives you a little bit more of a complexity to your villain, but I mean, not really, because even Zhao doesn't seem like a really big threat. Like you said, it undermines Zuko and Iroh as a threat, which Iroh doesn't even seem like a threat at all. He seems like Santa Claus, which I'll get into that in characters, you know. And then here we are, we're introduced to Kyoshi, who's one of Aang's past lives, and that doesn't even add much. Like we just said, it just doubles down on some flaws of the show and the characters. So I honestly, I have hardly anything, I don't really have anything positive to say about this plot at all. They essentially took what was a 22-minute kids show episode and stretched it into
like 50
minutes, and yet they took out all the parts of poignancy and put in fluff. Yeah. And it was so pointless. It was completely pointless of an episode. So I have a couple specific notes, negatives about the plot that I have. The waterbending scroll that just appears in Katara's backpack that Gran snuck in there with a note. Why couldn't she give it to them and tell her, hey, we had this the whole time? The waterbending scroll is not given to Katara that way in the anime. I think it makes way more sense the way it unfolds in the anime. About that point. But like, here you go, Gran had this the whole time, and now you can practice your waterbending. Here you go, somebody that has not been taught in waterbending at all, but here you go, here's some forms that you can do, which I don't mind that. I think there's value to that, but why did Gran sneak it in there? Okay, well, Zuko just found out there's a waterbender in the Southern Water Tribe because Katara met him, and, but no, we don't know now. Oh, we had to still keep it stupid. Made no sense. Zuko's notebook, why does it have information about Kyoshi Island? Like, Zuko's, like, researching all these avatars for what purpose, we don't know, but he's really worked up about this notebook, and then Aang had no idea about Kyoshi or his past lives or Kyoshi Island from, like, I don't know, maybe being the Avatar. He had to read Zuko's notebook and it's like, oh look, here's an island. Oh look, here's Kyoshi. Yeah, oh, let's go there.
That plot point actually makes no sense.
Why is he going there?
It is obvious that Aang knew he was the Avatar. Gyatso tells him, and I understand that, like, Gyatso, like, it was very soon after that like everything happened and he went into the iceberg and all that jazz. However, it's like, the implication is that in Aang's education, he would have at least learned world history, which would include avatars. Like, right. You know what I mean? Like, it's like us learning presidents.
Right, right. When it's like you would think that if any, like, lifetime, the Avatar can be born into any bender, like, ethnicity
from the next nation or whatever.
From the next nation, every nation is going to know what Avatar was last in their, right. peoples and what that Avatar did. You would think for a minute, like, Avatar, I mean, it does not happen in the animated version or in this version, but you would think Katara and Sokka would be like, oh yeah, we remember hearing about Avatar Korok, who was the last waterbending Avatar. And so, or whatever his name was.
I think something like that.
Yeah. But it's like, oh yeah, we remember hearing that story.
Well, and Aang should know about the last Airbender, right. Which name escapes me.
Yin Chain or something
Yin
like that.
Chan or something like that.
Yeah. So how does Aang have zero education about the Avatar when he is the Avatar?
Sense.
Like, all you had to do in the animated show, this is in the second episode, they go into the room with all the avatars, and the like, even in this episode, like, Zuko, all of his little statues, their eyes light up. So clearly, like, there's common knowledge of the Avatar. All we did in the animated show was have Aang walk into a room and Katara goes, wow, all of these are your past lives. And now in this episode, we're like, I have past lives?
Right. It's so silly.
It makes no sense.
It's literally, it feels like a parody sometimes.
It does.
And I hate saying that.
It does.
But
the part where they tell the Kyoshi warriors that Aang is the Avatar, and he's like, he's not the Avatar. If there were, there would be signs. And then the laser eyes from the that was the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Like, there would be signs. Oh, I think that's, like, who wrote this? A 5-year-old? Like, I've read middle school plays with more, like, ingenuity than that. It was so stupid. The part then immediately after that, when Aang is sitting in front of, like, the elders' table, like the Kyoshi warriors, and the elder of the village, or, the matriarch of the village, or whoever is sitting there. Again, we never learn her name. We don't know who she is. Guess she's irrelevant except to be a plot device. She's sitting there and she's like, no, you have to leave now because we have to protect the island. And, like, nobody believes he's the Avatar. Still, like, we're not given any indication that anyone believes he's the Avatar. And then she's like, Aang, like, gives this, like, mopey weepy speech like he's Katara from, the Ember Island players. And then she's like, Suki leans over and, like, says something to her, and she's like, I am reminded of how Kyoshi showed No, you weren't. You weren't. We literally watched it all happen in front of you.
Suki didn't say anything like
Suki
that.
didn't say anything like that, and we just heard her. We heard what she said. Like, are you kidding me? Like, did your writers write these 2 lines in separate rooms and not tell each other?
Was, like, more to the scene that got cut or something, but then it's a really awkward edit point.
Yeah, it makes no sense whatsoever. That's not what was said at all. Why doesn't, if the Kyoshi Island doesn't believe that Aang is the Avatar, why did they give him a 48-hour time limit? Like, and with this 48-hour time limit, which is an arbitrary number when you think about it, why would they let strangers into the shrine of their sacred, previous avatar? So clearly they believe he's somebody important, but then they give him a 48-hour time limit, and then for the rest of the show, there is no urgency that they need to get anything done in this 48-hour time frame. Like,
Aang's out there playing with the kids.
He's playing with the kids. Sokka's talking to Suki. They're like taking their time. They literally do nothing until the next afternoon. They've wasted 24 hours of their time frame, and they're just like, it's whatever. Like, what? Like, don't give them a time limit then. Just say, okay, you know what? We'll be kind. What? Don't give them a time limit. If we're not going to have any level of urgency, like Sokka, he's Mr. Idea guy, and he's not even looking for stuff in the shrine. Yeah. He's busy hanging out with Suki while Katara and Aang are the ones doing research. Like, Sokka's the one in the animated show that would be like pouring through all these books and like, but no, we
gotta find something. Yeah.
Like, no urgency. Like, complete lack of urgency. From any of the characters. And then so we're led to believe all of this happens within 36 hours. We're led to believe that nobody on the island believes believes Aang is the Avatar, but they are a little bit impressed that he's an airbender. But then when all of the Fire Nation is attacking their village leader is like, where's the Avatar? You didn't believe he was the Avatar. What? Now all of a sudden you're like, where's the Avatar? What? You just undid. Like, literally.
What do you believe, man?
There's no consistency in this plot at all. And then they're like, Aang connects with people. And no, he doesn't. He doesn't connect with anybody. He's busy whining about how he doesn't want to be the Avatar.
No, he was playing with the kids. That's connection.
But it wasn't. Why didn't you connect with the people last night? Why did Suki have to step in and no, he didn't connect with anybody. He's like, if you help me, then you'll be helping me. Like, wow, what a connection there.
Wow,
he doesn't connect with people. He didn't connect with anybody. And then that he didn't connect with anybody because that was Suki. She did that. I also had, why does he not know about his past lives? Why does Suki take off her makeup for literally no reason other than so Sokka can see her without makeup? If this is some ceremonial important process, you would think that these warriors would have kind of a ceremonial process to doff their robes and their makeup. Nope, she just decides, oh, you know what? I like you, so I'm gonna take my makeup off. Yeah. And then, sorry, I think I bumped my microphone. Okay. But I'm just gonna wipe my makeup off like Mulan, and then now you can see how pretty I am and fall in love with me. And then for the whole rest of the show, I got to be seen without makeup on. That was in my contract that I will wear the Kyoshi warrior makeup, but not for the last scene because I want people to know how nice I look. I don't think that's what that actress said, but the writers, I feel wrote it that way. The whole romance between Sokka and Suki is stupid. I'm sorry, but it just is. There's no basis for their romance whatsoever. It's just, he literally looks at her and thinks she's pretty. She looks like all the other Kyoshi warriors. What about her is attractive to you? You can find whoever attractive you want, but we've not given any basis as to why he respects her, why he admires her, anything.
Yeah, I have stuff to say about them in my character notes.
But as a plot, it's a completely useless plot line. Momo dropping fruit on the Fire Nation that they're attacking. It's this stupid animal sidekick thing. It's so kids show. It's just stupid. Why does Zhao shoot fire in slow motion in the final battle? That part was really he's literally is it's not even it's slow-mo. It's he paused before he shot fire at people. This is the threatening guy who's gonna hesitate before taking down the Avatar. And then Aang caused all this problems at the end of the episode. Like, Aang really caused the problems. Like, he infringed on their island. There are people coming after him, which he knows. They knowingly are aware that they're being hunted by at least Zuko, if nobody else. They're at least being hunted by Zuko. So they know that people are after them and looking for the Avatar. This island wants them to respect, just on a surface level. This island wants outsiders to stay away from their island. They want them to leave. They said, all we want is your books from the to look at your research from the shrine. So they give them that. And then when there's an attack, Aang's subsequent actions are literally him fixing the mess he made.
Right.
Like, he has caused a mess and he's fixing the mess he made. And the response of the village isn't, yeah, thanks for cleaning up your own mess. It's, you gave us reason to believe in you. What? I'm sorry. If I go make a mess and endanger the lives of people that have done me a favor, I'm not going to expect
doesn't make you a hero.
Right.
Yeah.
That's you being responsible. So overall, like, it's just, like you said, it's just so messy. And those were just some of the notes. I don't have anything positive. I made some other notes here about they still are insisting to use modern slang and phrases in what is supposed to be like inspired by like ancient Asian, and Inuit cultures. And yet we're going to say, Sokka says to Suki like 4 times, we should put a bell on you. Like, that's completely modern, like, colloquialism. Like, why are we saying that when we're supposed to be set in, like, a fantasy universe? Why Zhao is calling Zuko and Iroh a VIP? Like, excuse me? It just pulls you completely out of the immersion of this world. Even when Zuko is saying that him being the prince, that's got to mean something. And then I think Kyoshi says, it's about time, or something. One of the Kyoshi words, it's about time. Like, all of those are just very modern expressions and phrases, but especially we should put a bell on you. I hated that. Yeah. Like, there are no cats in this world. Like, putting a bell on a cat is where that phrase comes from.
Right.
Like, there are no cats, and they certainly don't make little jingle bells to put on the cats so that mice can hear them. Like, nobody's gonna do that. That's like a folk tale.
Yeah.
Like, that really irked me. I'm like, every time he said it, I was like, this is a modern phrase. Like, what are we doing here? So overall, I thought the plot was super, like, just insipid and nonsensical. It just felt, I don't know. It felt like a little kid's TV show. I feel like I'm watching a show made for children who were too young to even follow a plot or care. They're just looking at the pretty pictures.
Maybe.
And, some of the jokes are just like elementary at best. So overall, I couldn't give it any points. 0 out of 2.
Okay.
So
for our next category, which is characters, we allot 3 possible points. I gave this 1 point, and genuinely, I think that's a generous point. I tried to find some positives somewhere. So, Katara, I discovered why I dislike Katara's acting so much in this show. I couldn't put a pin in it in the first episode, and I figured it out this time. She feels so flat because the actress plays her in a way where I think there is slight improvement in her delivery of lines from the first episode. However, the moment her line is over, she goes into cardboard cutout mode, where she just exists.
She takes up space.
She is not reactionary. And I mean, as somebody who has taken acting classes in theater and all of those things, like, one of the things that's drilled into a beginner actor's head is that you are acting probably more of the time when you're not speaking, and she seems to only be acting when she is speaking or when she is being focused on. Because, I mean, there were some times where it was like Katara is the focus of the screen here, and so she's going to act. But the moment that somebody else is talking or something else is the focus that's not Katara, she's just there. And realizing that really kind of disappointed me, because I understand that she's young, but this is something that should have been corrected as it was happening. It is an easy thing to catch and correct. And either it wasn't caught or not, I don't know, but it certainly wasn't corrected, even if somebody noticed that it was happening. And I'm sorry to do that because I very rarely try to put the blame on an actor. But in this case, I think this is equal your bad on both the actress and the director, is that why is Katara just there so much of the time? Like, she needs to be engaged even when she's not speaking, and she feels so rarely engaged in what anybody else has to say. It kind of feels like have you ever been like in a conversation with somebody and the moment that it's your turn to talk, they just like check out?
Yeah.
That's how it felt watching Katara. Like, oh, my part's done, so I'm gonna just be here, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like
they go into NPC mode.
Right. And so in a way it feels just like really disgenuine, and it makes it hard to believe that Katara as a character has any sort of relationships like forged with characters that exist, like Sokka. This should be the character that she is the most engaged with, I would think. You've known him literally your whole life. And then characters that she should be developing close relationships with, like Aang. And you don't feel any of that genuine like connection or care. It's like she doesn't give a flip what Aang has to say when she's not talking. And I just found that really, really disappointing.
Another thing with Katara, and I forgot to write this down, I'm sorry to interject, but another thing with Katara that I feel like is such a flaw in her from the previous, from the animated show, is in the animated show, Katara has so much conviction.
Right.
Like, she believes what she believes. She's convicted in her own worldview and her values and her look on the world and how important the Avatar should be. Like, she has so much conviction that you see her, you know, especially as she kind of grows and matures as a character, like, she is kind of helping hold this group together.
Yeah.
And there's none of that in her. She's literally just existing.
And it changes the dynamic of the trio, because you look at them and you're like, I don't actually know who's wearing any hat. Like, I think one thing that makes the original trio of Aang, Sokka, and Katara so appealing in the original show is that they all kind of fall into their role. And Katara, this depiction of Katara, it's like she's not quite putting on any hat. She ghosts over a hat during a line or during a monologue. She ghosts over it, but she never actually picks it up and commits to keeping it on her head.
Right.
And it's just unfortunate. That's the best way I can describe it, is it's just disappointing to see how it's almost there. Like, the ghost of it is there, but it's never claimed.
And that's what
she never picks it up and claims that.
And that's so necessary anytime you have like a group adventure story. Is like Lord of the Rings, every member of the Fellowship has a reason to be there. Or, you know, in you know, even in like games you play, whether it's like an RPG or, you know, card game, like anything that where you have like individual characters, like you're known to have a specific, there's a need of the group that has to be met and only you can meet it.
Right.
And that's lacking in the characters of the show, period.
So,
yeah.
So it feels like a shadow of what could be. Too much focus on this romance between Suki and Sokka. Let's talk about them. I don't dislike the characters of Suki or Sokka. I don't think they're as vibrant as their animated counterparts, which I talked about Sokka kind of in the first episode, so I don't want to hash him out too much. I think what they really went wrong here with focusing so much on the romance between Suki and Sokka. I'm going to dive into spoiler territory again. If you have not watched the animated show, I'm kind of spoiling like second half of season 2 and like most of season 3 here. So scrub ahead. But Suki and Sokka do eventually have a relationship with each other. And it is, in the animated show, it does not really start here romantically. They have to build to that. They go through stuff together, and I I don't want to say they trauma bond, but they do develop an appreciation, reliance on each other, and then eventual romance kind of follows that. They fast track that so hard in this episode that it feels vapid and shallow because it diminishes the focus and strength of Suki as a character, where Suki's focus is my people. They, from the get-go, make it clear that Sokka has googly eyes for her, which is true of the original. So that part of Sokka's is not incorrect. From the moment he meets Suki, he's like, oh my gosh, she's amazing. I think she's so cool.
No, he's not. No, he's
Well, I
not.
guess
But that's the
that's
thing.
true.
Because that kind of what you're saying, I'm going to tie in a little bit. Sokka in the show, first in Kyoshi Island, he has to learn to respect her
That's
first.
true. This is true. But I just mean that, like, much earlier does Sokka kind of be like, oh my gosh, she's so cool. But Suki's focus is, I have a responsibility. And while she says that in this episode of the Netflix version, a lot of her actions don't necessarily support that, because they give so much time and attention to Suki being like walking through the village, and then she sees Sokka and she's like, and her mom notices and like, quit. Like, Suki is not like a love struck, like, you know, googly eyed girl. That's not who she is at her core. And so I think it's a disservice to her as a character to paint her that way, when the way that she's depicted in the original show is so much more satisfying, and it makes you at the end root for Suki and Sokka's relationship, because their foundation has become so much stronger than just teenage infatuation.
Yeah.
And so to build that, and again, spoilers, I'm sorry I'm taking so long kind of, but I think it's going to eventually, like, having this fast-tracked romance between Suki and Sokka is going to set up for failure Sokka's next relationship, which comes very soon in this show. And it's going to
if it's even in this show, this series.
Yeah, I haven't watched the Netflix past this, so I don't know. But if it happens, and knowing that it's down the pipeline and it's coming, it's going to make me kind of think Sokka's being a little more of a jerk about this. Like, does he just bounce that fast? Like, Sokka is portrayed a little bit as kind of like, you know, a teenage boy that appreciates a pretty girl, but he's not painted as like a womanizer. And I hope that this sort of, you know, tension that they build unnecessarily between Suki and Sokka does not eventually kind of lead him into being more like a womanizer, which would disappoint me, because it's not really a facet.
Or that he's like this fair weather, like,
right,
you know,
can't commit, no loyalty,
right,
kind of
just
deal.
whatever next like pretty face comes along, he's just gonna latch onto that one, whatever's convenient. Which I feel like even if they don't do that intentionally, that's what they're gonna risk having happen anyways.
And so and I'm thinking about that now in episode 2, is thinking, oh my gosh, why are they kind of like making it that deep that soon? You know, like, again, like you pointed out, they're given 48 hours 48 hours for no reason, and now this has become like, why are they glommed so hard on each other? It's not like either character. It shouldn't be, and it's not necessary.
And Suki's whole reason that they give is, I've been stuck on this island. I haven't seen the world, and you're like a taste of the world. For like, are you kidding me? So you're using him,
right? And again, and it sours it a little bit. And so I just feel like everything that they did to try to like make this romance like really, really like a thing in this episode is really to its detriment, to each character's detriment. Yeah, unfortunately. Everything about the characters is just unfortunate. Zuko looks like on borderline tears the whole episode, and I don't like that about him. And like I mentioned before, he's depicted as basically no threat because he's too busy being like, where's my stuff? Where's the Avatar? I just want to go home now. Like, and please stop. Like,
it's been 3 years. Like, you should have developed some coping skills by now.
Something.
You know? Which, don't get me wrong, there are people out there that have a hard time, and it takes years and years and years to get over the kind of experience that Zuko went through. But it's like, dude, come on.
So
this isn't the first speed bump you've encountered at trying to find the Avatar.
Right. The only reason I gave it 1 point is because I do think that casting for some of the new characters is fairly decent. I do agree with what you said about with your story notes about like some of the dialogue is kind of like goofy, but since I'm working more on characters now, I think that the guy that they chose for Zhao does depict him pretty well. I would say that the girl they chose for Suki I think she looks like the animated Suki. So I think they did a good job sort of casting them. And I think that delivery of some lines is better. It's just so messily put together that I had to isolate those things in order to give them any praise. So take my 1 point as a very generous with a grain of salt point. I was just trying to find like something to not like cream the heck out of this episode, but it is, in my opinion, a very generous point. So 1 out of 3 points for me.
Man. Well, I think 1 is very generous because I gave this 0 out of 3. I feel like the characters in this are just horrible. My kind of big overarching note for characters is, again, did we really make any progress in this episode? We just got 50 minutes with our principal cast, our main characters, and they have learned and gained and grown 0. Like, nothing has changed in them. Nothing has really happened to them, as like with the plot. And there's no growth whatsoever in these characters. We didn't learn more about them. Nothing. Like, it's just the flattest. We could have just watched like popsicle stick puppets move around and it would have been the same effect as watching this episode. Gosh. Like, it was not good. Again, I still think that the acting, it still feels like middle school play acting. These actors are just trying like as quick as possible, get their lines out. And then, I can just stand as myself and not my character because I'm done. I did my part. Like, again, like you said with Katara, like she's in character and says her lines and then, as fast as possible. And then when she's done, like she reverts back to the actress instead of the character. And I feel like every single person in this show at some point or another falls into that, some maybe more than others. There's no chemistry between these actors. I'm not convinced that Suki and Sokka like each other. I'm not at all. Like, they are moving around on the camera in front of each other, but like, I don't buy it. I don't buy that Katara and Sokka are related. I don't buy that Aang and Katara and Sokka have gained any kind of bond while they've traveled from one point to another. I don't buy that Zuko and Iroh have any kind of relationship whatsoever. I don't buy that Zhao has any animosity towards anybody else. I don't buy that woman and Suki are related. Like, nothing. I don't buy any chemistry or relationship with any of these characters. I think that's a huge problem.
It is a problem.
Because Avatar: The Last Airbender, I think this is the problem with this show. It's like 2 episodes in. I think the biggest problem with this show, Avatar: The Last Airbender, is not an exciting plot with pretty pictures. It is a character-driven story. And what makes it so good is that we have a compelling story with good characters that drive the story forward. And this episode specifically lacks any of that.
Right.
A couple specific notes. Zuko, I don't have a huge complaint about Zuko. I feel like of the main cast, he's like everybody on screen, he's probably the most believable. But again, I feel like I wrote I feel like he's acting by himself the whole time. Like, he's standing there like worked up as you know, this actor's ability, not to discredit this actor's ability, but like what looks like he's giving his best performance, and the actor playing.
He certainly seems stressed.
Well, but I don't mean that. I mean, I feel like he, as an actor, is giving forth his best effort.
I see. Okay.
In portraying this character's distress, like in the opening scene, and Iroh is standing there like this. Like, what? Are you in the same room together? Like, nothing. Like, I'm sorry.
Read the room, bro.
Nothing. Yeah. Just a flat brick wall. Like, so to an extent, like it's like if I'm talking to Tori across the room right here and she's staring at her phone, my performance is going to be different. How I even just speaking in normal conversation is going to change based on
how conversation dynamics go.
So can you really blame any of these actors for a lackluster performance when the people they're acting against
That's very true.
have nothing to get? There's no give and
Good
take
point.
in that. And I've noticed that a lot in this. Like Aang's like, all worked up about something, and Katara's like, she's checked out because she's not acting.
And it's like, she may be looking at him talk, but she's just like this.
She's a mannequin waiting for her switch to turn back on when it's her line to say something.
Then Aang finishes and she's like, you know what, Aang?
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa.
But then while she's talking, Aang's just gone, like,
yeah.
So I feel like that's maybe that's the secret sauce why that's so problematic in this, why these characters feel so flat. The Iroh in the opening scene I absolutely hated. He sounded like Santa Claus. He was completely campy. He had no inflection or emotion. He has this horrible imbalance in this character's portrayal of Iroh, and it's not a discredit to the actor. Again, I'm not trying to rag on these actors. I really do believe they're doing the best that they can, but I think their directing is bad, and I think some of it is that, like you mentioned, like, if I'm not reacting on screen of a camera, like I'm supposed to be acting and then I'm in the shot and I'm supposed to be reacting, like the director should tell me, you're in the shot. You need to make sure you're paying attention, like, and reacting. These are kids.
Yeah.
Like they're still learning. I'm ancient and I don't know everything. Like at 15, I would not be fully equipped to navigate a huge TV production.
Right.
So give these kids some slack.
Sure.
Like it's your job. Like their acting coach should have been on set with them to kind of like give them pointers in between takes and like help them out. Like
they don't look like you're here.
Right. Or
just look like you're here.
Yeah. And so I feel like Iroh, again, it's not a discredit to the actor, but he has this horrible imbalance where he's like, I'm this really wise, sagely person, and then, oh, food. Like, no. Like the whole thing with Iroh in the animated series was he just was a little more dry. Like, and I feel like that made it a little more, like, you didn't know, is he just yanking Zuko's chain? Is he really just like this goofy old man? Like, has he just checked out? He's retired, living the good life, babysitting his nephew. Like,
I think the thing about
there was
Iroh,
this unknown of Iroh.
I think the thing about Iroh that's not present in this depiction is that Iroh is so often in the original series just sure of himself, and so it may irritate Zuko quite a bit, but at the core of it, Iroh is just sure of himself, and that translates as maybe a little bit aloof, but maybe a little bit cold in some, but he's really not, and he delivers sort of like this anchor effect to Zuko, who spins like this in circles, and he can turn back to Iroh, and Iroh will be like, this is what we'll do then.
Iroh always let Zuko find his own way.
Right.
He always let Zuko find his own way, and this Iroh is like when he's
like the funny guy.
Yeah.
And he's
Iroh
like, has humor to him. I'm not saying he's not funny, but he's not the funny man.
He's a buffoon. So he's just an absolute buffoon. And then he'll have this sagely moment, but he still delivers it like he's a buffoon.
Right.
When he says, he's talking about this food that's good for you, and it's good for, like, dude, like, do you have to be like times 1,000? And then he still delivers exactly the same way when he's like, Zuko, the book didn't find the Avatar. You found the Avatar. Like, are you telling me a joke? Like, are you the court jester?
And it adds to the whole like parody effect that sometimes happens with this episode. And it's unfortunate. Why is Uncle Iroh acting like this is an SNL skit?
He is. It's terrible. I hate him. I absolutely hate him in the show. I want to click off every time I watch him. Sokka, why is he an immediate simp for Suki? Immediately, straight out the gate, like you kind of already touched on. There's no explanation. You already talked about Katara. I wrote the only note I had for Katara, and I think you hit the nail on the head. She's pretty much non-existent in this episode. Never mind, she is on screen a lot, but like you said, she feels like she's not even there. Suki, she's like, I'm a Kyoshi warrior. I'm not just a warrior. I'm a Kyoshi warrior. I follow the traditions passed down from generation to generation to protect my people. Like, every warrior in a tribe is taught by their people, warriors that came before them. Like, you're the same thing as Sokka, just
True.
because it was the Avatar. But no, we're not going to talk about, like, we're Kyoshi warriors. We're, you know, they didn't even touch on, I feel like, they wouldn't even touch on that the Kyoshi warriors are only female. Yeah. Like, hello, we had a great talking point there we could have touched on, and nope, we just didn't even mention that. Yeah. Like, we're a unique group of female warriors, and we're taught in this art, you know, whatever, and nope, none of that. Just, I'm a Kyoshi warrior because I keep our traditions. Like, every warrior in a tribe keeps their traditions and passes down their forms and teaching and techniques. Like, you're not special. You are special, but you just hit all the wrong highlights of that. Exactly. And then I really don't understand why they make Suki this wooden, stilted character. The whole scene where Sokka, like, finds her in the woods or something, or she sneaks up on him.
He's practicing with his boomerang, right?
Yeah. Why is she acting like an android? She's like a robot. She doesn't say anything.
Where he's like, he like throws the boomerang, he cuts the thing, she takes the fan out, and she goes.
Yeah, and then she's like.
Yeah, and he's like, what is going on?
I would be freaking out. I'd be like, is this a monster that came out of the woods? Like, this is like a creepy horror movie person. Yeah. It's like.
Skipping stalker.
Yeah, why did they? And then she doesn't speak when she's like doing half that stuff. Like, there's no like.
It's no wonder that eventually Sokka's just like, bye.
I would too. Like, why is she so awkward? Why do they like what? A woman can't be like a strong warrior without also being so incredibly like awkward.
I'm quirky.
Like, no. Like, it made no sense. And then we don't see that explained or like any expansion on like why do we just have this weird like Children of the Corn moment in the woods? Yeah. Like, what? No, I don't know. That did you like get? You know, it was so bizarre. Like, why was she so stilted? It's like a wooden puppet like moving around in the wood. Like, and she's like that in almost like every scene with Sokka, and I'm like, why are you attracted to her? Like,
right. It's like I don't know if it's supposed to be like the crush jitters, but like not translating correctly.
And they just like sucked out all her personality. Like, that was the whole thing about Suki, was like at the end of the Kyoshi Warriors episode in the animated show was like, she says, I am a warrior, but I am also a girl. Like, she had this mature blend of like, I'm still me. Like, being a warrior is what I do, and I take pride in that.
But I still have a personal identity.
Yeah, and I still have a heart, and I still care about people. Like, you know, that was such a great, like, it sounds so simple, and it is a little corny of a line, but like, it was shown to us on screen in the animated show, and there's none of that in this. Aang, I think I hate him. Like, he's like, I'm this monster with too much power. Dude, you're not the Incredible Hulk. Like,
yeah, that's what I was talking about in plot.
Yeah, it's like all of that you kind of said, like, it's trash. It's trash. Why would they go in that direction with Aang? Like, the whole, like, and then when he's like this happy-go-lucky, I'm playing with the kids, you're like, who's that? You have two personalities? Yeah. Like, what is this drastic shift in tone that we have? Like, it makes no sense. And like, again, like we talked about in the last episode, like, they just give him all this weight and burden of the Avatar at the beginning, and now we can't have any levity from Aang and it be believable because we didn't start him out as this young, naive, happy-go-lucky kid, and he learns to bear this weight as he goes, and we watch this heaviness as he matures, which is how things actually work naturally. Like, in a real human being, we start life with, you know, sunshine and rainbows, and, you know, any star is attainable. And then as we grow and mature, we realize that life has heavy parts of it, and life is hard, and responsibility is a heavy weight we have to bear. And as we grow, you know, metaphorically, we grow and learn to bear that weight, and how we have to bear that weight as an individual.
Right.
And we've taken that opportunity for Aang as a character, and we've just flipped it. We've started him with this heavy boulder on his back, and we've weighed him down all the way to the floor, and now he's like crawling in the dirt with all this weight, just depressed and sad and upset, and not wanting to use his powers and not wanting to use and now we're gonna have these moments where he's this happy-go-lucky kid.
Yeah.
You can't. Now you can't. You've written yourself into a corner.
Right.
And it completely changes the entire tone of the show, and it changes the whole dynamic of his group, because now Sokka and Katara have to spend the entire rest of this show, this is my prediction, they're gonna have to spend this entire rest of this show pep talking him, yep. Lifting him up, come on, it's gonna be okay, we'll figure it out. Whereas it was the other way around. It was Aang, who'd never really experienced life, saying, oh, everything will work out, and then he gets hit in the face and learns from life. Right. Because Katara and Sokka are like, maybe you should back off a little bit, we've actually seen some things and endured some hardships, let's try and impart some wisdom to you. And then we watched Aang grow as a character. We're not going to be able to have any of that in this show, which is so a huge problem of the whole plot and characters. Kyoshi, I think that her advice to Aang is really pointless in this entire episode. Because she gives him all this advice. They have this super circular argument back and forth, which is nonsensical when you really think about it. Because at the end of the day, she's like, actually, I'm just going to do it for you. So, which we kind of already touched about in the plot, but I think as a character, it just wastes her as a character. And then I also think it's very odd that she can see the future and sees that there's a problem coming to the North Pole. Again, it was just a plot convenience. The past lives of the Avatar can see the future. No, but they're trying to do that because of, in the animated show, what the advice Roku gave to Aang, but that made sense because if we're talking about sorry, this is a little bit of a spoiler, but if we're talking about a comet coming, you would know that. You can predict planetary events. We know a meteor shower's coming, and we can predict that years in advance.
Eclipses, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. It wasn't Roku seeing the future, and now we've just written into the Avatar lore that Kyoshi can see the future, that a problem's happening with the North Pole. No, the whole point was they were going, this is a little bit of plot, but no, the whole point of them going to the North Pole so Aang could learn to be a waterbender, because there's no waterbenders in the South Pole. He needs to learn from the North Pole, and Katara wants to learn too. So, but apparently that's not important. Anyways, I think Kyoshi seeing the future was just, it was a plot convenience of why we need to get them to the North Pole. Oh, let's have Kyoshi have ESP. So much. I honestly could not give any points for characters in this. It's just all of it was dumb. My one positive note, but it's not worth half a point, which would be half a point out of 3. Is what?
6th credit.
Yeah, it's not 1/6 of this episode because it was literally seconds of screen time. I thought the casting for Fire Lord Ozai was good.
Okay, yeah,
I thought that
Kim.
The casting for that.
I also mentioned that.
The reveal at the end,
yeah,
the reveal at the end and the casting was good. But yeah, it was atrocious. I just, it was almost unwatchable. The plot and the story, just made this almost completely unwatchable. 0 out of 3. Can't do it. Character 0 out of 3.
Okay, so for aesthetics, which is our next category. You're good, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I feel like I have a boulder off.
You were starting to talk real fast at the end.
I know. I had to finish. I just had to finish.
So for aesthetics, out of 2 possible points, I gave this 1 point. I struggled with this category too. I eventually settled on 1. I'm gonna explain. So, the worst thing I think with aesthetics is that some of the CGI and special effects are too much and not necessary. And we kind of talked about this a little bit in the first episode when we reviewed that, but that sometimes timing of certain elements doesn't quite line up, and I thought maybe it would get better, but it's still present in some of this episode. I felt like there wasn't as much bending in this episode as there was in the first episode, so I didn't notice as many glaring flaws, but I did notice it a bit, that just some elements seem like they don't naturally extend from the bender's body, and that could be tightened up a bit. That's my biggest negative. And I know that sounds like, oh, that's all you have, But while I do think there are good things that they do aesthetically, I think the color palettes are honestly really beautiful. And I think that they did a really good job with the Kyoshi Warriors aesthetically. The makeup is on point. I feel like the outfits are on point. It felt like to me that team, the wardrobe team, obviously took their time to like get that correct. And I think it translates very prettily on the screen. So I think that is a really good positive. And I think the score is a little bit better in this episode. I think there's a sort of a natural flow and ease in and ease out of score moments that are noticeable but not distracting. So those are things. And I don't have a lot of notes here. So I'm just going to kind of sum up the fact that like I only gave it half credit is because of this. In regards to their cinematography, everything they did was technically correct and right and good. But none of it is really unusual or stands out in any way. Nothing they did made me go, wow, that's a cool shot. Wow, that's really creative. Like they did a really nice thing with the lighting here to like make us like nothing stood out to me as like a particularly noteworthy shot. Nothing. And so I don't want to say that it was like bad aesthetically. I don't think it was bad, but I also think knowing the budget that you have,
that's true,
for something like this, having the context of this is a Netflix show and not a really good student film, you have the opportunity, resources, and manpower to make something look more visually entertaining than what you did in this episode. And everything is just cut and dry, textbook cinematography. And again, nothing incorrect. Nobody did anything wrong. There wasn't any bad sound or bad lighting or, I can't see what I'm looking at, terrible framing. That none of that is present. But also just let me remember something about your shots. Like, give me something to like grip onto visually or audibly, something. And I really just didn't have any moment like that. So I struggled, like, how do I rank a category when it's all there, all the pieces are present and working as they should, but not in any impressive way. So that's why I decided I'll just go half credit with that. And it's just kind of a not shiny half credit. Like, you did it. You accomplished everything you should have accomplished.
Participation points.
Right. You checked all the boxes, but you just didn't use any glitter pins for those checks,
Yeah.
And maybe one glitter pin would have been really nice to see. So sorry for not many notes on that, but that's kind of where I settled for aesthetics.
Yeah, I agree. I think that a lot of the like visuals I think there's a lot that's done right. Like you said, like textbook by the book, you did it correctly, but it's like you said, there's not a lot that's noticeable. I feel like, and I'm not as well versed in like cinematography and like the specifics of that as Tori is, but I do think that for the average person, if it's bad, like you notice something,
right?
Like it should. If you don't notice anything, that's usually a good thing, right? It's like your sound guy. It's like if you don't know the sound guy did his job, that means he did his job really well, right, because it wasn't noticed. But like you said, there wasn't anything, like you said, for the budget. I mean, I think that's a great point. You just kind of did the bare minimum.
Right.
So I didn't necessarily think about that when I was scoring my category, but I also thought, because you hit the marks and you did things correctly, some of the negatives that I noticed were like glaringly noticeable. So I actually, for aesthetics, only gave this half a point out of 2. And I did not set out this episode to like eviscerate it or be like overly picky.
Just to like jump in real quick. I think that we may sometimes give the impression on this show that we go into anything that we review with like a preconceived notion of what we're going to like or dislike. And we are people with preferences, and we are people who may already have existing biases in favor of or against something. So I'm not going to say that that's not a factor, but that's the reason why we created the score system that we have, is to try to avoid those preconceived notions as much as possible. So if we are rating something poorly in categories, it's because we truly believe that in that category there is much to be desired. On the converse side of that, when we rank categories really highly, it's because we truly believe that they're worth that merit. So just to like clarify, yes, biases are always going to play a part in everything that we do and say. We have the score system built to try to be as critical and like objective as possible.
Yeah.
So if you're new to our show and that's not clear, I just wanted to take the opportunity to say that.
Yeah.
So
good.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's all good. So some of the things that I noticed that were negatives to me were pretty distracting from the content. So and I feel like a lot of the like semi-positives that I did notice were kind of like, well, that wasn't too bad. Oh, but that was really bad.
Okay.
Like
I'm curious
the other side.
what
So like,
those
for example,
moments were.
like the bending. We don't see, like you said, we don't see a ton of bending. Katara's water bending was pretty good. Like the special effects, I was kind of surprised. Like especially when she's moving the water of the stream or whatever she's standing by, there's not a lot you don't notice any disconnect where the real water ends and the CGI water begins. I thought that was really good. But the fire bending was terrible.
Yeah.
Like it looked like we were back in like 2008, like 2010. Like the CGI for fire and to be fair, I've heard like Tori and I are both nerds. Obviously, we have this podcast that should speak for itself that we're nerds. I like listening to like audio commentary on movies and stuff. I've heard people say over and over again that the two hardest things to animate with CGI is fire and water.
Sure.
And
it makes sense.
Mud is probably a close third, but like fire and water are insanely difficult to animate. So I understand that technology may have not progressed completely, but if you watch a action film and there's a CGI explosion, there's believability there.
Right.
If somebody's shooting fire, like Zhao specifically, is shooting fire out of his hand, I should believe that that's real fire.
Sure.
But if I, as a layperson, can know that that's a CGI fireball and it's not an in-camera effect of a flame, like a flamethrower or something in like old 80s films, like they really had fire on set.
Sure, yeah.
You know, which is a safety hazard, don't get me wrong. But like, if I can tell, wow, that looks like a really cheesy fireball. Like, to me, that undermines that waterbending that looked pretty good.
Sure.
You know, I didn't think that Katara's waterbending when she's kind of moving the water in the air didn't really look believable, but I understand at the same time, like, water doesn't suspend in air.
Sure.
So what would it really look like?
Right.
But I do think that there's special effects of water suspended in air that does look better than what we've seen. I've seen it in film, much more believable looking. So there were a lot of moments where I was like, well, you know, that did look pretty good, but they're not really. You know,
Right.
Another example of that, Katara and Sokka, when they're wearing their Water Tribe like kind of like a jacket or like a poncho kind of style, and it's got the fur, that white fur around
like their overcoats.
Yeah, and it kind of has the frogs that maybe button in the front, and I was like, oh, their costumes look pretty good, like from the cartoon, but they look so squeaky clean. It looks like
good point.
you bought them from Party City and put it on that character. Every costume piece.
The believability of they've already been through like kind of a rough few days.
But not even
doesn't
that.
Translate.
It looks like it has never been worn before.
Interesting.
Sokka and Katara, they're sitting at the breakfast table.
Just brand new.
Their clothes look
Went and bought it at Target
immaculate.
this morning.
Yeah, they bought them this morning. Nothing looks worn in. No set piece looks lived in. It all looks like a brand new, shiny, clean,
Good point.
animated.
I did not think about that.
I mean, the animated show would looked worn.
Right.
Costumes looked lived in. There may be a stain on some like Fire Nation guy's shirt. Iroh may have dropped noodles on his shirt. There's a stain.
Yeah.
I mean, everything looked like this
Like real
belongs to that
real
person.
people use these things.
Yeah. You're telling me that when Sokka and Katara left the South Pole, Sokka didn't roll up something and put it in a duffel bag to carry it? Nope, it's perfectly pressed, cleaned, ironed. The fur is completely white. It's immaculate. Nobody ever got dirt, dust, anything on anything. And so it was almost, I understand, when you see it at first glance, you see a cartoon turned into a TV show. At first glance, you expect these like bright, vivid blues, and like for this show specifically, like you expect Aang's to be orange and yellow. You expect Sokka to be blue and white. You expect the Kyoshi warriors to be green and gold. And so that's what you're expecting, but none of it felt real. It felt like I'm trying to make a costume as close to the cartoon as possible. And so it's going to be this cartoony color blue, this cartoony color green. It's not going to look like an organic fabric that people of this time put on their body, you know? So like, you know, Lord of the Rings, like the clothes that they have on their body look like they've just walked across, you know, they walked to Mount Doom in what they had on, and they threw their, you know, spare whatever, pulled it out of a duffel bag and like put it on. It's got some wrinkles in it. You know, none of that kind of attention to detail seemed like it was present. And so I do give like half a point for the costumes, because I think the costumes are done really well, but none of it looks like it belongs to anybody. I
recently worked a production, and they spent 30 minutes after we dressed throwing mud, soot, and fake blood all over us. Mm-hmm. And that was before we even called rolling the first time. Yeah. So it's like, thinking about that now, like, I'm surprised I didn't notice that, because I feel like that is a very glaring oversight.
Yeah. And then things like the food table, like that was a beautiful spread. I was like, I'm really impressed. They're sitting at the breakfast table and there's this huge long table of food. It's a huge elaborate spread. But like, it's clearly not the house where they live in, because we saw Sokka getting dressed in a different building. Why is there that much food for 3 people?
Where is everybody else?
This is a communal table. It's just, if it was just laid out for them, which would make sense in the animated version, because they're all like, it's the Avatar.
Right.
And they're welcoming him. They don't even trust these people, and they made them this much food.
Right.
Like, you're a tiny island with limited resources. Why did you make this much food for 3 people?
Exactly. Like, if you don't trust these people, be like, breakfast is cold white rice and, you know, a fruit.
Oh, wait, you guys packed your own food, didn't you? No? Yeah. Okay, you can buy some from the store.
Right.
Like, why did they have this elaborate breakfast prepared for them? So again, that's like a visual moment that I thought was good, but then when you think about it, it doesn't tie into the story that we've been given.
Good point. It's like all of each piece, because of how they've sort of like destroyed the delivery through either a plot or character moment, all of the things that would support a good or better character or story moment gets lost because of the like ruination that's already occurred.
Right. So there are things like, those were a lot of the kind of things I noticed. The Zuko's scar, I had a huge problem with. It looks worse. How does it look worse than the last episode? I don't understand why on someone's face that they've been burned and scarred from a burn, why they have these thin feathering lines on the side of their face. That doesn't happen.
That's like, not how skin
That's
burns.
not how skin burns. That's not how flames like would move across the face. It literally looks like he has kind of this teardrop shape, and then literally like pinpoint lines of feathering. Like, you couldn't have researched, like, obviously don't want to make it so like graphic for a young audience, but like everybody thought that Zuko's scar in the M. Night Shyamalan movie was terrible, and I'm like, I'm sorry, this one isn't better.
Right.
It's not believable as a scar, and it's not colored like like scar tissue, and these weird like feathered lines just really distracted me. Any scene he was in where he turned the side of his face where you could see it, I was like, turn around, like turn the other way, like, and not because it looks like a graphic scar, but because it doesn't look like a scar at all. It looks like somebody face painted you with a paintbrush. Let's see, anything with Suki and Sokka I didn't like visually. We kind of already talked about like the weird like wooden movements of Suki. When Suki's showing Sokka like forms, like Kyoshi Warrior forms to do, and he's like mimicking her or following her, her back is to him, and he's mimicking her movements from her back. They're not looking in a mirror. There's no mirror for him to watch her. How is he knowing what to do? The entire scene, he is behind her watching her back.
And how is she doesn't check him.
She's not teaching him anything. She's just moving, and he's like, oh, I learned
Simon
this yesterday.
says.
No, but he's not even like following her. There's no limit. There's no hesitation. He's not like watching her and then moving into position. He's literally like, just like a they're like two puppets on the same string. Like, you can't even see what she's doing. How are you copying her? Like, why are they not facing each other? That would have been, if you're really trying to build up this romantic montage moment, face each other. There's more like human levels of intimacy if you're face to face.
Yeah. Like,
that, it was just like, okay, your form movements are kind of cool, but like, this makes no sense in the context we're given here. I also thought that, two kind of more costume pieces that I mentioned. I think only Suki wears it. I wish we got a better look of all of the Kyoshi Warriors, but I think Suki's the only one. She has this metal piece of her headband that goes across the front, and I don't know if she's the only one that has it or if they all have it.
I don't know.
But it's this flat metal piece, which is exactly like it is in the cartoon, which I liked, but it doesn't follow the curve of her forehead. It actually extends beyond her forehead, and it looks really awkward and cumbersome. Like, if it was an ornamental piece of like your uniform, you would still expect it to have some level of function, because you're not wearing ornamental pieces to like, so that someone can identify you in battle. Right. You're wearing it as part of like your heritage. So I would expect you that to at least follow the curvature of the forehead, and as a
would be
band
shaped for you.
Right. So I thought it was really odd. And there's some shots where they're like shot at an angle of her face where it looks like it doesn't fit her well, because it's just like slapped onto the front of her forehead. And then another thing I noticed, I had to pause it and rewind the episode because it was so distracting. But there's a shot where Suki is in the Aang's like playing with the children, because that's what he does apparently. And then Suki's in the village and she looks over and sees Sokka, and Sokka's standing on the porch, and they have this wider shot where you watch him walk into the house where I guess they're staying or something. And the shoes he has on are solid white. It looks like he's wearing white Vans. And I don't think it was a choice, because Katara's also wearing white shoes. So why, like, it's so, but the shape of them, when you look at it, they look like Vans high tops that Sokka's wearing. And it's like, no, they're wearing white fur boots because they're water tribe, and it's like seal fur or whatever, or polar bear fur or whatever, which those are not Avatar: The Last Airbender animals. Like, all the stands gonna come at me. But it's like, it shouldn't be that distracting then. You should have picked something that would print on a wide shot better, because or that maybe wouldn't fit, maybe that looked furry. Or I was so distracted. I was like, did this guy just wear like normal shoes to set? Like, I couldn't tell. The detail wasn't there. The other problem I had visually was Kyoshi. When Kyoshi shows up, like her flying again, Aang flying around, and Kyoshi's just like like in the air, like blasting off like Team Rocket. I was like, this is ridiculous. And then Aang at the very end, when he is like doing his tribute to Gyatso or something. Like, you know, he's buried and he's like, "You're my friend," or whatever. Like, his eyes and those tears, I was like, did they edit it in post? Fake. What the heck? Like, we watched him cry in the last episode. What is going on? Like,
they put literal donut water donuts on his eyes like this.
And his eyes are solid black. He's like holding his eyelids almost shut because he doesn't want the water to fall out. Like, what the heck is going on? It was so distracting. Like, nobody could look at that and be like, dude, this doesn't look right. Like, this isn't very good.
Yeah.
Like, but so all of those like visual moments were just like spattered throughout the whole show, to the point where I was like, every like other scene, I was like so distracted visually from what I was watching. So that's why I only gave it half a point out of 2.
Okay.
So. Oh, I did want to mention the CGI. I think kind of similar to my note on the last one. I don't think the CGI in this episode is that great. Just like the first episode wasn't. It all looks very like rote and, you know, kind of rinse and repeat of any other show. Nothing stood out. Nothing. It feels like when there's CGI, especially for a set or a scene and the background is CGI, even Appa, it literally just looks like, they're on a green screen now.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like Appa as a character alone, he's such a huge character in the animated show, and he just looks so distracting. Like, we should have had some, like, Netflix, you had the money. You should have
some sort of like actual Appa apparatus.
Yeah. It would have just printed so much better.
I mean, if they can do it with Jurassic Park 30 years ago,
right,
they could do it with Appa.
Right. You know you have the money for it too. So, half a point out of 2 for aesthetics.
Okay, next category is personal taste and preference. So, out of 2 possible points, I gave this no points. I literally got bored and zoned out, and there were multiple times where I caught myself zoned out and had to stop and rewind and play again and be like, I can do it. I can watch it. And I think that's bad. I don't think that there should ever be anything that I watch for enjoyment that I have to rewind because I was not paying attention. And I had to do that, I think, 3 times in this episode. It's only 50 minutes long.
Right.
Only 50 minutes.
Right.
And I had to rewind 3 times because I just wasn't there. So, I have nothing more to say. I think I've said a lot. And I have nothing more to say other than 0 points for personal taste and preference. I don't want to watch that again.
Yeah. Yeah. I also gave this 0 out of 2 points. I said this episode and this show is just terrible. I don't find it engaging. The characters don't compel me to care. And the feel overall is like just a cash grab of a show. I don't think the people involved had the vision for what made the series work as an animated series. And it feels like watching the Ember Island Players.
Yeah, you're right.
Except I can't even laugh about it like M. Night Shyamalan's version. So.
True. All right, so last category is creativity. Mm-hmm. Out of 1 point, I gave this 0 points. This is what I wrote. This is like repackaging a beautiful Lego set into a dirty Ziploc bag and then trying to reassemble it in a dim room after losing pieces.
Wow. That's kind of poetic.
Thank you. I came up with that about 5 minutes before we started recording. And that's what I wrote down.
Yep.
But it's all of the pieces, and then they're like, oh crud, well, we want to do it this way. All right, well, we'll just go with it. We'll figure it out later. And then it's like, oh, crud. Well, now we move this piece over here to fill this hole. So now this has got a big glaring hole. What do we do? I don't know. Put something else there. We'll figure it out later. And that's how this episode feels, especially after episode 1, is like you're changing so much about like the base of how the story is told, that if you're gonna rearrange critical core plot pieces, it is going to domino effect. And we're starting to see that first domino hit the second one, and now it just feels messy. It feels like a less shiny, pretty version of what was. And so that's why I kind of likened it to like a Lego set. It's like you put it together, first and it's like, oh, it's so beautiful. And instead of like disassembling it as it was when it came packaged, you just like shove all the pieces into like a dirty bag, and then it goes in the garage for 6 years, and then you pull it out and there's a hole in the corner and a bunch of pieces have fallen out, and you're like, I'm gonna still put it together anyway though.
Yeah.
So that's the best, like, I guess analogy I could come up with.
Yeah.
But definitely not creative.
Yep. Oh, I remembered something else in aesthetics I forgot to write down, but I thought about when we were talking. The scene where Sokka is in like his room or whatever, and Suki walks by and sees him without his shirt on. That part, 1, was stupid, but 2, it is freezing cold. You can see both of the actors' breath in that scene. Why is he standing there with his shirt off and the door open and there's no heat source in that room?
Right, just close the door.
Or take their breath out of post.
True.
Like, I don't
That's
believe
true.
it. So, sorry.
That was
I thought about that,
stupid.
and I forgot
it was
to mention
another, like, Suki's weird moment.
Yes.
She was like,
standing
like,
there.
move on,
Can you
girl.
imagine if the roles were reversed?
Yeah, everybody would be like,
You'd have people picketing in the streets.
yeah.
All right, for creativity, sorry. Had to mention that. Creativity, out of 1 point, I also gave this 0 points. My note of this show, as far as creativity goes, I like yours. This was what I had, and I thought about this in plot. I almost wrote it down, and I scribbled out in black, and I put it in creativity because I think it's applicable there. This feels like a YouTube kids show. What big corporations think kids want to watch. Mediocre, exaggerated acting, stale humor, subpar special effects. Rather than what made Avatar: The Last Airbender stand the test of time and what kids actually want. Good storytelling with compelling characters.
Agree.
So, 0 out of 1. You failed, Netflix. You just did. Sorry. Not sorry. You should be sorry, Netflix.
Yeah, I deserve an apology.
So, yeah. So, what is your final score for episode 2?
2 out of 10.
Mine is 0.5 point out of 10.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah. Pretty bad.
Pretty bad.
Alrighty. This, full disclosure, this episode was so bad. I don't even really have any lightning round questions for us.
Well,
So, no, I do have some.
right.
But I'll pull them up. They're not going to be anything I have 4, and I stole some of them from the last time we reviewed
I do that
it.
too. I steal
So,
stuff.
do you have a this is so bad, best or favorite story moment of this episode? You have to pick one. Okay, we have to answer these questions. You have to pick your favorite or a best story moment of this episode. This episode is going to be 7 hours with the way Tori's thinking.
No, I'm going to cut it all out. I'm going to cut this all out. With one of those, like, SpongeBob screens, it's like 2 hours.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, you should. It'd be hilarious.
God, I genuinely don't know. I'm going through the entire episode in my brain.
This episode was so bad. I watched this episode 2 days ago before we're recording, and I've forgotten like half of it. If I hadn't looked at my
half of
notes,
it is literal
forgettable.
fluff.
It's forgettable. And they got rid of the Unagi.
True.
Didn't even have
They
the
did.
Unagi.
I don't know. Do you have an answer?
If I have to pick, I would say the scene where Zhao decides. No, I do. The part where they reveal the Fire Lord,
Yeah.
where he gets the letter.
Yeah. That would be mine too. If I have to pick something different, I think it would be the introduction of Zhao.
Yeah, I was
That's
gonna
it.
say the stuff with Zhao was not terrible.
Right.
Just wasn't very good either. I didn't even talk about him in characters because he was that forgettable. Okay, favorite character or character moment of this episode? I have an answer. The Fire Lord.
The Fire Lord, yeah. The Fire Lord's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, he's bad, but he's cool.
And he was so minimal, so we didn't have to
True,
endure
true.
him for very long.
I'll pick the Fire.
Least favorite adaptation in this episode?
I think for me, it's genuinely Kyoshi taking over Aang's body.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like the impact was all wrong. Like, just completely wrong for both characters, both Kyoshi and Aang. So
It's a bunch of stuff you're going to have to undo moving forward or
Genuinely.
retcon. Yeah.
So I'm going to say that's the moment where I literally went, what?
Yeah.
Like angrily at my TV.
Yeah. I didn't mind her taking over him as much as I minded that entire conversation between her and Aang.
That's
because it's again, it's double downing on all the problems with Aang's character, which makes him so unlikable.
Right.
So, last question. Sorry. What change would you make to this episode?
I would condense the whole thing into 15 minutes and move on.
Yeah. I think
move
that's
on.
a good answer.
There is way more in book 1 to tide us over. And if you are only making 8 episodes, let's get to moving. Because while I believe that the introduction of Kyoshi Island and the Kyoshi Warriors is important and critical, we did not have to take that 22-minute episode and stretch it into 50.
You know what they're going to have to get rid of in this season is the entire story arc with Zhang Zhang. They're going to have to get rid of that whole thing because the whole point of that episode is Aang needs to learn restraint. And they've started from the beginning where Aang has all this restraint because he's scared.
Because people are scared of him.
And he's a monster.
Right. See, and that plot point should have been cut from there and let Aang bring it up then with Zhang Zhang. Like, okay, you're right. I do need to learn restraint because, this happened with Katara and then this also happened back when I was training, and this is a problem that I need to, whatever.
Except in the animated, it wasn't a problem. Like Aang,
right? But if they're gonna use that, the whole like they were scared of me, that would have been the place to bring it up,
right? So now, it's all horrible. I would just erase this episode completely. I feel like it's completely useless. It serves no purpose, which is a shame because I feel like the Kyoshi Warriors have a huge fan base, and Avatar Kyoshi is pretty integral to the Avatar, The Last Airbender lore as a whole.
And Aang's growth as a character.
But I think this whole episode is completely pointless and useless.
Yeah.
So I would just erase the whole episode, which is a cop-out answer, I guess. If I had to pick, just pick one moment that you had to change. I would take out the Sokka and Suki romance. I would go back to, and again, this is kind of a cop-out because I'm comparing to the original source material. I think that it's so important for Sokka and Suki in the animated version is that Sokka, maybe he's trying to impress her because he's a dumb teenage boy, but he learns to respect her. Yeah. He's not just all gaga over her, and that's why he wants to know more about her. It's that he respects her ability and her intelligence, and then that's why he wants
and acknowledges that she does what he cannot.
Right. So anyways, any final thoughts?
I'm glad this one's over.
Yeah,
to be honest,
me too.
I know that sounds terrible of me, but I'm glad it's over.
If you guys want us to keep going on this Netflix
you're gonna maybe
series,
have to tell us.
You need to tell us because this is kind of painful. I mean, we're willing to suffer for the views.
We do,
and
we do suffer for the views.
And sometimes we it's kind of a good a good hurt, like when you exercise. But at the same time, if you don't want us to keep going, we might just not move on to other things. So
other pastures.
Yep. Alrighty. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode. We hope you had a good time. We really did have a good time recording this episode. We always do. If you didn't, though, please feel free to tell us why. Leave us a comment on our videos or, touch base with us on our socials or our website. Links to our show notes, Patreon, socials, and a suggestion box are all on our website at lionandmousepodcast.com. You can review this episode on whichever podcast platform you prefer and let us know what you think. Thank you guys so much for listening. We will catch you in the next one.
Bye-bye.